Good morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and start today in our reading lesson a new story. It's a three-part story. So kind of like last week, we're only going to get, I think, 2 parts of it done this week. And then the last part will have to be next week. But we're also beginning a new unit in our reading. So if you would turn in your book to page 154. Actually, it's page 153. It's Unit 3. The name of this unit is called Quests. Now, do you happen to know what a quest is? A quest is a search for something. Okay, so this picture here, you see the soldiers and they've got that cannon. Obviously, you can tell, and that's in the background, that's the Declaration of Independence. So you can tell just by that picture there that this is, a historical picture. But these soldiers, they are on a quest. And what is their quest? What are they searching for? They're searching for freedom. They're searching for the enemy to fight for freedom. So have you ever searched for anything? And did you find it? All right, so all of the stories that we're going to be reading in Unit 3 are something about a quest. All right, so there's a scripture that goes along with this unit. It's Colossians 3:23. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. So some quests can be self-motivated. For your own self, for your own glory. I want to do this so that everybody will clap for me or everybody will come see me or whatever. But those quests that we do unto the Lord, perhaps we're searching for people who need something. Perhaps we are, searching for somebody that needs encouragement or whatever the case is. So these are quests, and we should always do our quests heartily as unto the Lord. All right, so the name of this story is called Pony Pinning Day. It's actually a true story. I'm not sure if this story actually happened. I believe that this did, but this is actually something that goes on in Virginia year after year and has for some time. So I'm not quite sure if this is a true story, but nonetheless, I want to show you these 3 vocabulary words first. These are words that we may run across. They used a stout wagon to carry the heavy loads of bricks. So what do you think stout means? Strong. Somebody or something or someone who's stout, you could say that they're strong. Okay. She cleaned and set up the dining room until it looked prim for the guests. What do you think prim means? Tidy, cleaned up, picked up. Okay. She almost couldn't see the men on the horses as the cavalcade raced past her house. What do you think a cavalcade is? It's a group of men on horses. You ever heard of the cavalry? Well, that kind of comes from that word. A cavalcade is a group of men on horses riding like going to war, perhaps women, but generally I think of men. All right. So let me bring up a couple of pictures here. Not that one. Let's see. Okay, here's a map of the area, the setting kind of, the where, I guess. Now this map right up here in the corner where it says area enlarged, okay, that means they've zoomed out. They've gone further up into space and they're looking down now. They've enlarged it. Now this area right here is Virginia. It's the state of Virginia. This right here would be West Virginia. And then this little greenish funny looking state right here is Maryland. Okay, now so then they've zoomed in, they've made it bigger right here. So here's Virginia. So this part right here that you see is going to be let's see, right here, I believe. No, it's where it hits Maryland. So I guess it would be perhaps right here. Yeah, oh yeah, it is, because it's inside there right here. All right, so this right here, it is one long island, but it's divided into 2. You got the Chincoteague and Assateague. Okay, so and you'll understand that here in just a minute. Anyway, I just kind of want to show you this map before we get started. So let me go back. I have a couple of other things I want to show you. These are some pictures of Chincoteague Island. Okay, now here's you some horses. Now I think you'll get a better understanding of why there's all these horses on here in just a little while. Right, here's a camera way up high looking down at the island. This is on the, I guess, the river or right around the ocean area. Beach area. There's some wild horses on there. Looks like a really cool place to live. Looks awfully pretty there, doesn't it? I think that's a deer out there, isn't it? A lighthouse in the background. Look at all those horses. Right on the beach. Look at that. Just a couple more pictures. Wild horses. All right. I'll just go ahead and leave this on the screen while we read. All right, so let's look now on page 154 where the story begins. Pony Penning Day. Now, you see the picture at the top. Now, there's a little bit written down there below that, written in italics. I'm going to read that right quick. In the book Misty of Chincoteague, two children named Paul and Maureen want very much to have a horse of their own. The following story, taken from that book, tells how Paul and Maureen tried to make that dream come true. So the name of the book that this comes from is Misty of Chincoteague, and I actually have that novel. If for some strange reason you ever decide you want to read it, you just let me know and I will get that book to you. I know several of my kids have read that book and they loved it. All right, the name of the first part of this is called The Straggler, and these are some things that I want you to listen for as we read. How do Paul and Maureen plan to make their dream come true? And why is this Pony Penning Day so special? Okay, so keep that in mind as we read. And remember the rule, you've got to read along with me just like you're reading alone. Okay, here we go. Pony Penning Day always comes on the last Thursday in July. For weeks before, every member of the volunteer fire department is busy getting the grounds in readiness, and the boys are allowed to help. I'll do your chores at home, Paul, offered Maureen, so as you can see that the pony pens are good and stout. Paul spent long days at the pony penning grounds. The pens for the wild ponies must be made safe. Once the Phantom was captured, she must not escape. Nothing else mattered. Paul and Maureen Beebe lived on their grandfather's pony ranch on the island of Chincoteague, just off the Virginia shore. Across a narrow channel lay another island, Assateague, which was the home of the wild herds. They were said to be the descendants of a bunch of Spanish horses off a Spanish galleon, which had been shipwrecked there several hundred years ago. Once every July, the men of Chincoteague crossed the channel to Assateague and rounded up wild ponies. They swam them across the channel to Chincoteague to be sold on Pony Penning Day. Paul and Maureen had gentled many a wild colt, but just as the colt was learning that they were his friends, Grandpa Beebe would sell it and the children would never see him again. They had earned $100 to buy a horse of their own, and the horse they wanted was the Phantom. This was the mysterious wild mare about whom so many stories were told. None of the round-up men had ever been able to capture her. But this year, Paul was old enough to go with the men, and he was determined to get her. When I do, he said, I'll tie a rope around her neck to show she's already sold to us. The night before the roundup, Paul and Maureen made last-minute plans in Phantom's stall. First thing in the morning, Paul told Maureen, you lay a clean bed of dried seagrass, then fill the manger with plenty of marsh grass to make Phantom feel at home. Oh, I will, Paul. And I've got some ear corn and some lasses to coax her appetite. And Grandma gave me a bunch of tiny new carrots and some rutabagas, and I've been saving up sugar until I have a little sack full. It was dark and still when Paul awoke the next morning. He lay quiet a moment, trying to gather his wits. Suddenly, he shot out of the bed. Today was Pony Penning Day. He dressed up quickly and thudded barefoot down to the kitchen where Grandma stood over the stove, frying ham and making coffee for him as if he were man-grown. After a hurried breakfast, he ran out the door. He mounted Watch Eyes, a dependable pony that Grandpa had never been able to sell because of his white eyes. Locking his bare feet around the pony's sides, he jogged out of the yard. Maureen came running to see him off. "Whatever happens," Paul called back over his shoulder, "you be at Old Dominion Point at 10 o'clock on a fresh pony." "I'll be there, Paul." "And you, Paul," yelled Grandpa, "obey your leader, no matter what." Day was breaking. A light golden mist came up out of the sea. It touched the prim white houses and the white picket fences with an unearthly light. Paul loped along slowly to save his mount's strength. All along the road, men were turning out of their gates. "Where do you reckon you'll do most good, Bub?" taunted a lean sapling of a man. He guffawed loudly, then winked at the rest of the group. Paul's hand tightened on the reins. "Reckon I'll do most good where their leader tells me to go," he said, blushing hotly. The day promised to be sultry. The marsh grass that usually billowed and waved stood motionless. The water of Assateague Channel glared like quicksilver. Now the cavalcade was thundering over a small bridge that linked Chincoteague Island to Little Piney Island. At the far end of the bridge, a scow with a rail fence around it stood at anchor. In spite of light talk, the faces of the men were drawn tight with excitement as they led their mounts onto the scow. The horses felt the excitement too. Their nostrils quivered and their ears swiveled this way and that, listening to the throb of the motor. Now the scow began to nose its way across the narrow channel. Paul watched the white hills of Assateague loom near. He watched the old lighthouse grow sharp and sharper against the sky. In a few minutes the ride was over. The gangway was being lowered. The horses were clattering down, each man taking his own. All eyes were on Wild Maddox, the leader. "Split in 3 bunches." Wild clipped out the directions, loud and sharp. "North, south, and east. Me and Kim and the BB boy will head east. Wimbrow and Quillen goes north, and Harvey and Rogers south. We'll all meet at Tom's Point." Paul touched his bare heels into Watch Eye's side. They were off. The boy's eyes were fastened on Wild Maddox. He and Kim Horsepepper were following their leader like the wake of a ship. As they rode on, Paul could feel the soft sand give way to hard meadowland, then to pine-laden trails. There were no paths to follow, only openings to skin through, openings that led to water holes or to the grazing grounds. The 3 horses thrashed through underbrush, jumped fallen trees, waded brackish pools and narrow winding streams. Suddenly, Paul saw Wild Maddox's horse rear into the air. He heard him neigh loudly as a band of wild ponies darted into an open grazing stretch some 20 yards ahead, then vanished among the black tree trunks. The woods came alive with thundering hoofs and frantic horse calls. Through bush and briar and bog and hard marshland the wild ponies flew. Behind them galloped the 3 riders, whooping at the top of their lungs. For whole seconds at a time the wild band would be swallowed up by the forest gloom. Then it would reappear far ahead, nothing but a flash of flying tails and manes. Suddenly Wild Maddox was waving Paul to ride close. "A straggler!" he shouted, pointing off to the left. "He went that way! Get him!" And with a burst of speed, Wild Maddox and Kim Horsepepper were after the band. Paul was alone. His face reddened with anger. They wanted to be rid of him. That's what they wanted. Sent after a straggler. He wasn't interested in rounding up a straggler that couldn't keep up with the herd. He wanted the phantom. Then Grandpa's words flashed across his mind. "You, Paul, obey your leader, no matter what." He wheeled his pony and headed blindly in the direction Wild had indicated. He rode deeper into the pine thicket, trying to avoid snapping twigs, yet watching ahead for the slightest motion of leaf or bush. He'd show the men, if it took him all day. His thin shirt clung to him damply, and his body was wet with sweat. A cobweb veiled itself across his face. With one hand he tried to wipe it off, but suddenly he was almost unseated. Watch Eyes was dancing on his hind legs, his nose high in the air. Paul stared into the sun-dappled forest until his eyes burned in his head. At last, far away and deep in the shadow of the pines, he saw a blur of motion. With the distance that lay between them, it might have been anything, a deer, or even a squirrel. Whatever it was, he was after it. All right, that's all we're going to read today. So let's go back to the first part and ask just a few questions. So how do you know that Pony Pinning Day is a special day? How often does it take place? once a year in July. And they prepare for it weeks in advance, and it's just a special day. So in what way is Maureen able to help Paul with the preparations for the big day? She doesn't get to go, but she helps. What does she do? Taking care of his chores at home for him. That's a big help, isn't it? My kids have to do that sometimes. Whenever their siblings go off to do something, they'll have to do their chores at home. They don't often say they're going to do it. Mom has to tell them they're going to do it, but nonetheless, it gets done. What is the one thing that matters to Paul as he works? That they catch the phantom and he does, or she does not escape. So where do Paul and Maureen live? With their grandparents on that farm on the island of Chincoteague. So what's important about the location of their home? They live right across the channel from Assateague, where those wild herds of ponies live. How have Paul and Maureen earned money? They've helped with wild colts for their grandfather, taming them and, tending to them. Why do Paul and Maureen want the phantom so much? Everybody's been talking about the phantom, and everybody wants the phantom, so they want the phantom. So let's look right here on page 155, and let's find the paragraph that explains why Paul and Maureen want the phantom. So it's going to be, see, they had earned, okay. It's on the left-hand side of page 155 at the bottom. It starts, Paul and Maureen had gentled. You see that? And it goes all the way down, and it ends up at the top on the right-hand side where it says, was determined to get her. Okay? I want you to read that paragraph out loud. And you might want to go ahead and pause it and read that paragraph out loud. Did you read that out loud? Now, how do you know Paul and Maureen believe that they're going to get the phantom this time, even though no one's ever been able to catch it? They're going to tie a rope around its neck to show that she's taken, and they've built a stall. Because remember at the beginning, Maureen says, hey, that stall's got to be nice and stout. So look at page 156 then. What special treatment does Grandma give Paul this morning? What does she do for him? Makes him a very good breakfast with some coffee. Makes him feel like a grown man. What do you think man grown means? Because he says, like I was man grown. What do you think that means? Just means grown up, like a man. That's exactly right. So look at page 157. What words does the author use to tell you that the man is making fun of Paul? What do they mean? So let's look on the left-hand side and look on the second paragraph where it says, where do you reckon? Okay, now let's look at these words. Where do you reckon you'll do most good, bub? Taunted. Taunted means kind of mocked or teased. So taunted is a word the author uses to let us know that. And then it says, he guffawed loudly. That kind of means he kind of laughed this little teasing laugh. So anyway, those words taunted and guffawed are code words that he was mocking or teasing or somehow making fun. Now, let's see here. Let's turn now to page 150. Let's go all the way to the page we just finished, to the last page of this section, page 159. What causes Paul to almost fall off of his pony? He's only holding on with one hand because he's trying to get that spider web out of his face, and then the pony rears up. What does it mean to stare until his eyes burn in his head? Looking at something so hard, trying to figure out what it is. What does a sun-dappled forest look like? I think we had the word dappled a week or two ago in our reading. Remember, dappled is when it's kind of spotted, like a dappled horse. So what would a dappled forest look like? spotted with shade or different things like that. Yeah. Or maybe even spotted with different colored leaves. Why do you think Paul's so determined to capture the straggler? He wants to show the men that he's a good worker, that he's grown, and that he's able to do the job. So now, do you think Paul's going to find the straggler? That's the question. All right, so now let's look in our work text. We only have one page to do today. It's going to be page 65. It's a map, and there's 8 questions on it, okay? So I'm going to have you fill this out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know if I need to put this other map up here because I don't want the maps to get you confused, but I'm going to leave this map up here, and I want you to try and see if you can use mainly you're not going to use this map really on the screen. You're really going to use the map that's right there on your page to answer these questions. So we've studied maps before. I know when we first started homeschooling, we studied some maps. So I'm going to let you do this page yourself. I'm going to give you a grade on this page. So use the map to answer the questions and do all the things that you need to do on this page, okay? Now, if you need any help, make sure you send me a message on Google Classroom. All right, that's all for today.